neoliberalism, what we're really talking about, and you'll add to this, but we're talking about trade policy. So we could talk, if you want to call it free trade versus fair trade, you could take us all the way back to the revolutionary times on that one. We're talking about tax policy, of course. We're talking about labor rights, the organized labor movement. And we're also talking about, I guess, to me, the one that I'm the least interested in, but probably very, very important. You wrote a book about this, antitrust, as well as, I suppose, we could throw in the courts, because even if we had different policies and legislation, now we have a weird court that might not like those things. But what am I missing? Trade policy, tax policy, labor rights, and antitrust. What else are we talking about here?
Deregulation and privatization are big.
Yeah.
That the government really shouldn't have any protective function. Its job should not be to protect consumers. Its job should be basically to support and defend the property rights of billionaires and big corporations. If you look at, first of all, it's important, I think, to look at the results of this. When Reagan came into office in 1980, about 2/3 of Americans had a middle-class life. About 1/3 of Americans were members of unions, and because unions typically set the wage and benefits floor in a community, you had another 1/3 of Americans who had union benefits, even though they weren't members of a union, because local employers had to match the union just to get people to work for them. So thus, you had 2/3 of Americans in the middle class. Today, that is down to 45%. So that has collapsed. And back then, it was, you could be middle class with a single income. Now it requires 2, sometimes 3 incomes to be middle class, and a lot of debt typically. So, there's that. When Reagan came into office, we had 60,000 more factories in the United States than we have today. Over 60,000 factories have been moved out of the United States, principally to China, but also to Mexico and Vietnam and Malaysia and other places. That represents between 10 and 15 million good paying jobs that left the United States as a result of neoliberalism. So, we're seeing, in the 41 years that since Reagan imposed neoliberalism on the United States in 1981, we have seen a $50 trillion transfer of wealth out of the pockets and homes of the middle class and into the pockets and money bins of the top 1% of Americans. So those are the most consequential and fairly obvious effects of neoliberalism and what it's done to America.